The reign of Aethelred the Unready was dominated by the Viking Wars. The English king's responses to the terrible Viking raids on his country were usually chaotic, disorganized, and riddled with cowardice and treachery. No man better personified the chaos in Aethelred's realm than Aelfric, Ealdorman of Hampshire, save for perhaps Edric Striona. On more than one occasion, Aelfric would stab his king in the back and create havoc for the English people. In 991, after the Vikings had defeated an English army at the famous Battle of Malden, Aelfric found himself in the company of the king, and evidently his word was held in reasonably high regard by Aethelred. After a period of Viking pillaging, slaughtering, and general destruction on English soil, Aethelred called together the key men of his realm to discuss what to do. Among those in attendance at this council was Aelfric himself and Sigric, the Archbishop of Canterbury. After much discussion, Aethelred was advised to pay the Vikings financial tribute, which would be known as Danegeld, so they would desist from their raids, or so the theory was at least. This tactic had been employed elsewhere against the Vikings, including by the Frankish king Charles the Bald, who wanted to bring about an end to the incursions in his kingdom of Ragnar Lothbrok. What Charles realised, and what Athelred failed to grasp properly, was that payment to the Vikings would hardly deter them from further raids. Once you paid them once, the raiders would know they could extract more wealth from you by further demonstrations of violence and bloodshed. But that was the course that Athelred was advised to take by Aelfric in 991. Despite the bloodshed that had taken place, the payment of Danegeld at that juncture seems to have been entirely needless. The situation at that time was far from being irredeemable for the English, yet, because of this first payment of tribute to the raiders, the days ahead would now become very dark indeed, as the Vikings' raids grew in ferocity and terror, and Aelfric had played a significant role in that by urging the king to capitulate. But it does seem likely, in fact probable, that during that particular meeting, Aelfric's loyalties lay not with the king now, but treacherously with the Vikings. Certainly, the following year of 992, Aelfric was fighting against Athelred, although it seems Athelred didn't realise that straight away. The king ordered the ealdormen to blockade a Viking fleet, but Aelfric was, by that time, in communications with the enemy. He sent a secret message to the Vikings, warning them of Athelred's plans to blockade them and starve them into submission. Aelfric, described by Florence of Worcester as a singular example of wickedness, now dropped all pretences and joined the Vikings as they attempted to slip away from Athelred's forces without detection. When the English realized that the enemy was making an escape, they followed in hot pursuit, although with little initial success. However, the Vikings were waylaid by another English force made up of men from London and East Anglia. A naval battle broke out, with the English inflicting severe damage on the Viking fleet, capturing a number of ships, including that of Aelfric, who just about managed to escape. In 993, Athelred proved that there was great animosity felt towards Aelfric, as he had the ealdorman's son, Alfgar, blinded. It must be noted at this point that Aelfric was far from being the only traitor in Athelred's realm. The same year that Alfgar was blinded, an English army had been assembled in the north to resist the Vikings, only to disintegrate when the leaders of that army, of English birth but with Danish blood, fled at the last moment. It may be after his son's cruel punishment that Aelfric then spent a number of years seeking to avoid Athelred's wrath any further. Certainly by 1003, Aelfric had won the king's trust enough to be charged with the command of another army. But Aelfric's abstinence from troublemaking wouldn't last, as this latest campaign would prove. Men from across Hampshire and Wiltshire had assembled to put a halt to the ravages of the Danish king Svein Forkbeard, and as Ealdorman of Hampshire, Aelfric, seemingly reconciled with the king, was a natural candidate to be a commander of this particular English army. But when battle was about to be joined, Aelfric pretended to fall ill, perhaps even going as far as to induce vomiting to prove his supposed inability to march into battle. Seeing the discord in the English ranks, Svein simply went on his merry way of murder and carnage. One would have to question why Aelfric's supposed sickness was enough to prevent the English from fighting Svein that day. He was only one man after all, and surely another commander could be found. In reality, what this incident exposes is just how fractured Aethelred's kingdom was, and how devoid of natural leaders England was at that particular time. But was Aelfric really as much of a traitor to the English as it appears, or was there perhaps mitigating factors? In 1016, Aelfric could be seen fighting alongside Aethelred's son Edmund Ironside at the Battle of Ashington, where Aelfric would be killed, during Edmund's war for the English crown against Canute. Edmund was altogether more inspiring than Aethelred had ever been, and it is a possibility that Aelfric had been especially disillusioned with Aethelred's kingship. Nonetheless, that does not excuse Aelfric's behaviour. Aelfric's treachery in 992 and 1003 led to further horrors for the English nation, who were already accustomed to bloodshed, and Aelfric's encouragement in 991 of the payment of Danegeld was little more than the encouragement of Aethelred's cowardice. Whilst Aelfric was not as dastardly as an Edric Striona was, for example, he was, nonetheless, a symbol of the failures of Aethelred the Unready. Aethelred's disastrous reliance on men like Aelfric and Edric was exactly why he is known to history as the Unready, or the Ill-Advised. Aelfric and Edric, among others, with their counsel, set Aethelred on a path of self-destruction. But the infuriating thing is that Aethelred seems to have at least had an idea that this was going on. Clearly, Aelfric's betrayal in 992 absolutely infuriated the king, hence his cruel punishment of Alfgar, but he allowed Aelfric back into the fold, perhaps thinking that the blinding of the Ealdorman's son was enough to subdue Aelfric for good. He was, of course, hopelessly wrong.